So 2006, we really started to look at ODM movement. We really started to look at, okay, we've got to start to provide more education, because with all of the experience now that I had accumulated, with all of the miles that I accumulated, with the concepts that were starting to be birthed at the studio, we needed to give trainers something that they could actually take away, something tangible. So there we started to create DVDs. And that for us was a pretty significant change in what we were doing, because this was now meaning we were having to define what our concepts were, what our philosophy was. And meeting Thomas Myers in 2007 really had given me a lot of clarity, because prior to 2007 we were still talking nerve, muscle and bone, which from my background, both from my training background but also from working with horses, wasn't a complete picture. So Thomas's ability to be able to lay down the foundations of seeing how we can start at our toes and finish at our nose made total sense to us. Because when it came to conditioning horses, we didn't isolate areas. We conditioned the horse as a whole being. So it was interesting, because that year we started to look at, or 2007, we started to look at effective movement. We started to sort of ask the question, was this something that when you gave it to a client that there was change? And in fact there was. And that the change was almost instant. In fact it was instant. And I'm not talking about change fixing, I'm talking about empowering the client to take a movement to create now an ability to move and feel better. That's what we define instant change as. We were working them within their threshold. We were allowing their bodies now to perform as they were designed to perform the everyday movements they needed to. We were creating and developing not just the innovation and concepts, but we were now creating more applications. And that was an interesting term in this 4-year phase, because at this stage is when the internet really kicked in. There was more information than ever before available to people. And yet there was more confusion happening for clients, coaches, trainers, practitioners. So the one thing that we've really always prided ourselves on at ODL Movement is we create practical solutions. We create applications that work, that are effective. And that measurement, that metric of that effectiveness is based around the human being in front of you called the client. We had also at this stage, especially coming up to 2007, we had performed many, many workshops. And now, at this stage in 2016, we're well and truly over the 500 mark. But we had constantly travelled the US, the UK, Michelle Delcourt, myself and Richard, doing workshops for PT on the Net, teaching people about self-myofascial release, talking about function, talking about how we can get certain parts of the body to do certain things, and how we can create recovery and rehabilitatory programs for people with all sorts of issues in their body. I had the fortune of being invited to, in 2008, Meeting of the Minds, which was held in Colorado. And it was 23 of the world's best who had 20 minutes to give their philosophy to over 200 people in the room. And the people in the room were the leading gym owners in the world, the leading manufacturers in the world. It was amazing. It was invitation only. And to hear people come into a 2-day event like that and have 20 minutes to talk and not be allowed to bag anyone else in our industry, which our industry was renowned for, was pretty amazing. You had the likes of Greg Roscoff, you had the likes of Chuck Wolf, of Tom Myers, you had the likes of Tom Purvis, Scott Hobson, Michelle Delcourt. It was just incredible to hear them give their point of view, to give their philosophy and not be judged. And then in 2009, we had PTA Global, which Richard Boyd had come up with Bobby Capuccio, and basically had recruited Michelle and myself, and then we had the brilliance of Rodney Corn and Scott Hobson. So Scott coming from Power Plate Australia after 6 years of Head of Education, and of course Rodney as being Head of Education for NASM. So an amazing diverse pack of people who had the greatest intention to deliver the advanced research the industry was craving for. We had to develop a certification, not through choice, but that's what was needed. And then when we got into the advanced certification, the systems, science and tools, I can honestly say now, it's the best product still available on the market. It's second to none. And it has helped us evolve our business, as it will anyone who takes it on board. Fun, enjoyment, had really now become a major player. And it was interesting because at ODI Movement, we started talking about fun back in 2004, 2005. 2009 is when you saw the likes of Dr. Stuart Brown and John Rady now start to produce books and science and research, not neuroscience, on how important it is to have enjoyment, to have fun, to de-stress the body, to decrease the sympathetic nervous system. So now fun was starting to, once again, get into how we condition people. In other words, play. And I still to this day see that people are trying to break play down. If you really want to understand what play is, understanding play is about feeling, not about thinking. And if you want to understand it, go and play with someone who has an intellectually disabled or disability, who is a 3-year-old child, who has no preconceptions about what the outcome is going to be or the experience is going to be. They just want the freedom, the interaction and the connection, because that's what play is. And it doesn't matter what age we are, now we're starting to understand. It brings freedom, connection back to any client. I guess the highlight for me in 2010 was really starting to appreciate that I had arrived after starting in 1997. And I don't mean I arrived by being the best in the world. I don't mean I arrived by being the most financially rewarded person in the world or having the biggest ego. For me, arrival and being able to say that what I do works and being respected by my peers, by these people who I've admired and learnt from, meant that I could actually give someone a program, I could give them a movement, I could apply a tool, and the person in front of me would get an outcome. I wouldn't tell, I would ask. I would inform the client to do some certain things and I'll allow them to unravel their bodies in their time frame, in their threshold. To put this in a picture, I guess when you really want to test yourself to see whether what you have works, you really want to roll it out somewhere where you've got a cross-section of people. And I had the fortune of meeting a guy called Wayne Fletcher in 2010. I had already done some work with one of his players who had osteitis pubis, and we'd had huge success getting him back to play pain-free, and he played in a premiership that year. So Wayne had invited me to come along and implement the system into the club, into all the players. Well, and I say this to impress you, not to impress upon you, to impress upon you, not to impress you, that when you expose a system to 50 players, and you've got probably 15% of those players who I would call semi-professional or professional, and the rest of them are guys who are just there for the fun, for the enjoyment, but they still want to have some success, then you're going to have all sorts of players that are going to follow this system, and hopefully with any sort of structure, you will get some sort of success. I wasn't aiming for perfection. I was aiming for something that was going to allow us to have a reasonable ability to keep people on the paddock, to keep people playing. And it was interesting because in 2 years of doing this face-to-face with the players, we had not one soft tissue injury. We had 72 weeks of training and playing without any injuries at all. And that for me was my metric, my measurement to say, okay, what we have actually works. So that whole 2007, 2010 timeframe for me really was an era of where I became a presenter, a global presenter, of being able to talk to people, but not only talk to people, allowing them to become empowered in an enjoyable manner to educate not only themselves but also their clients. My practitioning skills, and I call it practitioner, I don't call myself a trainer, because I believe horses and dogs have trainers. I believe we're practitioners. And I believe my practitioning skills have now become far superior to what they ever were, because I have less expectation on the outcome. In fact, all I do is observe as I apply. So for me, I guess my role from 2010 onwards has really become more of a mentoring role. And I've done that intuitively, where now we're starting to focus on that now more of a professional position. As we go through and we start to talk about 2014 and beyond, we'll start to understand now where ODM Movement has and is taking the products that we have, the applications that we have, but more importantly, the experience that we can create for people who want to be involved and who want to be the best at what they do.